Welcome to the Hardwood Time Capsule podcast presented by Callaway Golf. Our platform brings you, the Hoops fan, deep inside the playing careers and personal lives of past players and coaches in Australian basketball. From World Championships to Olympics to the adversity of careers cut short, we explore it all direct with the players themselves. I'm John Casey. Here's your host, Andrew O'Brien.
G'day Hoops fans. This episode we catch up with three-point shooting big man Axel Dench. He takes us through what his career was like in the NBL, what it was like playing 4 years at Gonzaga, what it was like at the NBA Summer Leagues, and much, much more. Hope you enjoy this episode. See you on the other side. It's Axel Dench. Welcome to the podcast.
G'day, how are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Very well, very well. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for coming on. And I know a lot of people are going to enjoy listening to this because we've got a lot of fans that sort of responded when I mentioned that you were coming on. And we're also going to get to, I guess, I think you're a little bit ahead of your time in terms of the way you played the game. And we're going to go down that route in terms of, an outside game for a five that sort of these days is more common. Back then, really, it was yourself and Chris Anstey, really, that were sort of those three-point threats. But as we always start these episodes, fans love to know sort of where those players that they cheered for are these days and what they're up to. So what keeps you busy these days, Ax?
So I am a freelance brand strategist. So I play in the branding and advertising and design space. I've got my own consultancy. So I've had that for about 6 or 7 years now. And I either work with kind of big agencies or small agencies, or have my own set of clients. So work from home. So this is the house, but every now and then I have to tie up one of those kind of suits and tie scenarios and go out and meet and greet clients. But so I'm in the branding and strategy space. Yeah.
So is that something that you were sort of educated on tertiary, or because we had Stephen Hoare on last week and he mentioned that you'd done a little stint or something at Latrobe Financial as well, or something like that?
Yeah, so straight out of Adelaide 36ers, kind of moved back to Melbourne, which is probably where the best job prospects were. It's my hometown, and got a job at Latrobe Financial. Greg O'Neill, obviously ex-Melbourne Tigers chairman, so he offered me a role, and I was there for 3 years doing kind of 3 different roles in finance. Kind of, I had no intention kind of stay in finance, but it was a great opportunity to kind of get blooded into the white collar world, so to speak. But my undergraduate and MBA are in marketing. So I knew I always wanted to get into that, but no one kind of gives an ex-athlete the keys to the car straight off the bat in agency land. So you kind of got to get some runs on the board and show that you can kind of deliver. So that's what I had to do.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So you mentioned your undergrad. Was that when you were at Gonzaga? You studied marketing. Okay, fantastic. I guess what we'll do is sort of, for those that because we have all range of people listening on this, from sort of those making their way in basketball now to those that remember your playing days very well. I'll sort of back over your professional career a little bit. So as I just mentioned, obviously you went to Gonzaga, which in the late 90s, I guess it was definitely not as common as it is now to go to college. Way more common these days. There weren't as many. I think shortly after you were in the same conference, Daniel Kickett went to St. Mary's, but I think you perhaps had just sort of finished up and come to the NBL. Was that right?
Yeah, I think his freshman year was the year after. I think it might have been 2001. I graduated 2000. So I think we were very fortunate to miss him. He was an absolute dynamo at St. Mary's. I think Gonzaga still, even in his time, kind of had the number over him, but he was an absolute scoring machine by all reports, so I'm glad I never had to defend him. I played, funnily enough, back when I was in between Europe years, I played against him at St. Mary's, did a traveling tour, and I think he had something like 36 points all in my face, just knocked them down. I think he hit 10 threes, and I looked at, and we were just kind of a ragtag team put together, but he absolutely tore me a new one, so I'm glad it was never done in front of a college crowd because they are unforgivable.
Yeah. Oh, we see the Gonzaga games these days, and that's it's pretty impressive. Any of those now? I'll sort of run over your professional career, which we'll go back to in more detail. But obviously, you do 4 years at Gonzaga. and then go to the Wollongong Hawks for 4 years. I think a lot of people, even 23 years ago now, but remember especially that grand final series. And your rookie of the year in that first year as well. An unbelievable year, and hopefully Wollongong at some point can get back to that sort of success. I think it would be good for a small town like that to sort of taste that again. And then you mentioned I'm going to need your assistance with these, Ax, because my pronunciation is probably not on point, but you go and play a couple of years in Portugal. Can you name the clubs for us?
So the first club was Barreiro FC, spelt Barreiro, but pronounced Barreiro, and I didn't get that for about 3 months, so I was definitely the foreigner on that team who didn't know what he was saying. And then the second year was FC Porto, so the big soccer club that plays in Champions League, etc. We were the very minnow basketball team. I think our entire salary cap was less than their least paid player on the soccer team. That's how big soccer is. But yeah, so I had two great years over in Portugal, and loved it. The competition was solid, not amazing, but really solid. But I kind of treated it as, I'm going to go through surgeries and pain and blood, sweat, and tears for this sport. If I can go live in another country, learn another language, and kind of be absorbed into something that I would have no business being in any of these cities otherwise, then absolutely go for it. So it was fantastic. Loved my time over there.
Yeah, is that pretty common over in Europe to have like we see with Real Madrid and those sort of things, like basketball and soccer clubs joint?
Yeah, so a lot of soccer clubs, and they are obviously the biggest thing since sliced bread over there, they'll have basketball teams and European handball teams that play within the basketball stadium. So, I mean, you might get half a page of basketball news and European handball news, 27 pages into the sports section after soccer, kind of like AFL here in Melbourne. But it still has a decent following. And we made some noise, but no one would really know about it. And we kind of got to go out onto the soccer field at halftime of one of the FC Porto home games. We got some polite applause for winning this cup, and it was all very nice. And then they beat Benfica FC in the championship. And Benfica is obviously this local nemesis. And the whole 80,000 people just went absolutely berserk. And all of a sudden we were like, oh, these so-and-sos have done something special. So yeah, it was a nice experience.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and I think it's something that people that go to Europe should experience. I mean, we see things like not so much Portugal, but like the crowds in Serbia and Greece and that are just off the charts. Quite a few players that have been on the show have mentioned that whilst it was nice to play in Europe, there wasn't always a guarantee that you would see the money that you were promised. What was your experience like? Were you okay, or did you have issues with that as well?
No, I was very fortunate. About the only kind of shadiness was, we always said, at least my first year, it was kind of one of those challenger clubs, those little engine that could clubs that never really won anything, but they were kind of in it to make up the numbers. And you'd go and get your money once a month in a brown envelope from one of the owners of the club at 11 o'clock at night in their kind of social club. So you'd go up to the fourth floor and it was pitch black, and you'd walk into this room. And I fortunately got the money, because they were like, okay, here's your money. And then you're left to your own devices. So my now wife moved over, I think 3 months into my contract, and she opened the bedside table, and inside were 3 or 4 just stacked envelopes full of euros. She was like, what is this? What are you doing? Because our apartment, you just push the door in, the lock doesn't work. You turn the power on from level 1 to 2, the entire apartment building shorts out. I mean, it was the third world economy type town, but that's just the way it was. And you just kind of ran with it and went from there. So, but I had, horror stories of teammates playing in Turkey who got beat up and sent straight to the airport. So I was very fortunate compared to some, but got out alive financially.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I appreciate you sharing that, because for those of us that never made it to professional ranks, you don't sort of see or hear that behind the scenes stuff and the Godfather style pickup of your cash. Pretty interesting. But I guess from there, in terms of coming back to the NBL, you joined my mighty Melbourne Tigers there, and then obviously play with Adelaide as well. But I guess if we take it all the way back, obviously you're a big man. Were you always the big kid in juniors? And how early did you actually start playing basketball?
Yeah, so always the big, slow, lumbering man. No one ever used the word Axel and speed in the same sentence. It's probably fair to say. So always the big guy from early on. And I think I started playing probably when I was 7 or 8 at the local kind of Baldwin Youth Club, and went from there to Wattle Park Saints. But yeah, always the big guy, and even through Nuttawading Spectre Juniors, just the big guy that plodded up and down and kind of camped in the middle.
Yeah, when you were at Nuttawading, did you play with any players that we would know?
Yes, so Matt Shanahan and I went all through juniors together.
Yep.
I think I played with, maybe he didn't make NBL, Vlad Barui.
Okay.
He was an ABA player back in the day. But yeah, Matt Shanahan is probably the teammate that I played with the longest, who kind of made a lot of noise across his NBL career.
Yeah, 100%. We've had him on previously, and obviously went to the AIS and played with the Magic and stuff. Were you in like Vic Metro teams as well? Anything like that?
Yeah, so I made top age under 18 and then both under 20 teams with Matt. So we kind of, I won all three. I think Matt won 52 championships in a row. He was the wunderkind of our age group growing up. So he won everything that he ever participated in. But yeah, so I kind of very, very late bloomer, even professionally. I was still probably a late bloomer, but just kind of, made those teams and had some success. So that was nice.
Yeah, excellent. Were you playing any other sports as well during juniors?
Yeah, so I was at the school I went to. I was on a clarinet scholarship.
Oh, wow, okay.
That was really a basketball scholarship, but basketball is only kind of the 2 winter seasons. So in the summer I would row, and in the kind of term 4 I would do athletics, which was a bit of a joke. I was shot put and high jump, and I think I peaked at high jump in year 8 at 180 centimeters and never jumped higher for the next 4 years, which
180 is still pretty high. I mean, the pros are doing just on 2 meters or something.
Yeah. So I think I got very lucky on one day, and my light frame flew over the bar, and then after that I just kept getting heavier and slower after that. So never got me higher.
Yeah. Well, I mean, basketball suited you to a T anyway. I don't think you really needed to go down the high jump path. Yeah, well, obviously you mentioned earlier you went to Gonzaga, which is a major college over in the States, as many of the listeners would know. Can you sort of tell us how that came about? Because as we established early on, it's not as common these days. It's, I mean, super common. Was there parents encouraging you? Was it just something that you wanted to do? How did that all come about?
It's an interesting story. I think I probably had a few offers to go to college, and I was straight out of high school. I was training with Melbourne Magic in my year 12. Was a development player for them for a year and a half, and getting these college offers, and I was just, no, I don't think so. I'm going to be a professional player, and I'm going to earn squillions of dollars here in Australia, and I probably don't need to do that. But at the same time, I was doing my undergraduate degree at Monash, and I deferred the first year out of high school and did macroeconomics, the first subject, my second year. And I don't think, even if I tried, I don't think I could have failed any harder than I did in this one subject. And Mum and Dad, who were kind of former teachers in their early careers, they were like, well, let's have a bit of a sit-down chat and kind of talk about what you actually need to achieve. And they were really smart, saying, if you make squillions of dollars of basketball, great. If you don't, then you need qualifications to kind of open up avenues afterwards. And right about the time that I failed macroeconomics, Gonzaga, where John Rillie had played at and Paul Rogers was at as well, they had a guy who failed school. So they had a scholarship going for a replacement big. And they reached out to John Rillie, and his coach, Mike Dunlap, reached out to Brian Gorgon, asking if he knew of anyone who kind of could fit the bill. And Brian said, well, you could go to Boston, you could go to St. Mary's, you could go to Eastern Washington, you could go to Arizona, but I know you're doing this business degree. Gonzaga's got a really good business school. And other than Paul Rogers, who's probably going to graduate in a year, you could theoretically be a walk-up start to be a starter. And I think I basically made the choice that day. And I went out and had this huge night celebrating that I'm moving to college in a few months. And I get home at something like 4 a.m, can't spell my own name. And there's a note on my bed from my mum saying, last SAT for the year is 7 a.m. at Swinburne University. So I had 2 hours that day, Saturday morning. So I had 2 hours to kind of slap myself back into reality. And I kind of dragged myself in, did the exam, dragged myself out, and kind of hoped that I kind of passed, because if not, I was in a lot of trouble. So it all worked out in the end and went over there. And yeah, so I had a fantastic 4 years.
Yeah, excellent. Well, that's great that you did, because it seems to go one of two ways. It's people either really love college or they find it really tough and homesick and just not for them. If anyone wants sort of another side of the story, is if you ever listen to Dave Barlow, he's done a podcast, and he really didn't like his time. He went to Metro State.
Yeah.
But everyone's obviously going to have different experiences based on where you go, what your personality is like, how much of an adventurer you are, going and some new experiences.
Oh, absolutely. And I had 3 coaches in 4 years there. I finished with Mark Few, who's the current head coach, and he's been there for 23, 24 years. But I had one guy who was on his way out, the athletic director, who was also the basketball coach. And then we had an interim guy who was there for a couple of years. And then I had my 3rd head coach going into my senior year. And funnily enough, at the end of my 2nd year, I was like, I don't know if my role is what I think it should be, and I don't know if I get along with this head coach. And talking to Brian Gorge, and I was like, I may come home. Is there an option? And he probably very honestly said, there is no option for you here, Axel. You probably should go back to Gonzaga. And I think those last 2 years we made it the Elite 8 and the Sweet 16, and it was the smartest thing I did. I came out with a degree, a lot of radars of teams around the world, and haven't come back to Australia, but it was a fantastic kind of end result. What was a bit of a rough road in the middle there.
Yeah, no, well, the persistence to stay with it, and obviously paid off, as you said, a couple of great last years there. And from what I've read, started 32 out of 33 games in your final season. So you can't have much of a better run into going professional. Was it? And I ask all the players this when they come on: was there a year in college, or was it when you were training with the Magic before you went there, where you actually thought, I can actually, like you said before, make squillions out of playing basketball, but like actually do this for a living? At what point or what age do you think that penny actually dropped, like this could be a full-time job?
Yeah, I think I always kind of, I don't know whether it was kind of big man stupidity. I always thought, everything will fall into place at some stage. And I think I was at Melbourne, I was behind John Dorge and Chris Anstey, and I had no business expecting to have a career on that roster or get any time. But in my mind, I was just like, well, I can do X, Y, and Z. Surely it's going to work out for me sooner or later. But it wasn't, I think, until my senior year that I kind of started going, okay, I need to think of this. Basketball is a great sport and you can make a living from it, but it is a business. And you see NBA players get cut and traded halfway through a game, etc. And you work out, okay, to get some notoriety and I need some stats. And I talked about point guard, who was a really, really savvy guy, a guy called Matt Santangelo, one time, I think, or another player. And he said, okay, I make sure that I average 4 points a quarter and 1 to 2 assists a quarter. And if I can get a rebound in there as well, by the end of the game, I've got 16 to 18 points, 6 to 8 assists, and at least 4 to 5 rebounds. And for a point guard, that's a fantastic stat line. And I go, okay, if I get 20, and college, 35-second shot clock, 40-minute games, I might get 25 minutes a game. If you break it down minute by minute, okay, I need to average this and this. And it wasn't until I kind of worked that out, still played my kind of glue role, 1% role, because I was never a first option scorer. But if you can take those opportunities when you can, all of a sudden it changes you from being kind of a guy on a stat sheet that just kind of made up the numbers to, okay, he's actually a pretty pivotal player. So it wasn't until that senior year that I worked out, okay, there are scouts in the crowd now. They've come to see me. They've come to see 2 other guys. I need to do something to make sure that they don't just kind of rub my name out at the end of the game because someone else has kind of done something a bit more impressive than me. So it was a little bit of a mentality switch to go, okay, you cannot be the team first guy all the time. It's sometimes you need to kind of look out for number one. Not all the time, but when the opportunity arises, got to take it with both hands.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting way to look at it, very analytical. And I guess from a mindset point of view, perhaps for the coaches listening on this, if you've got players that sort of, if they have a bad start to a game or something and they get down on themselves, it's probably a good way of resetting them, going, okay, well, you didn't get your 4 points this quarter, but now's the start. You've got to get 4 points in this next quarter, and resetting your mind. That's very interesting. So thanks for sharing that with us. In terms of post-college, obviously coming into the Brendan Joyce-led Wollongong Hawks, how did that come about? Obviously, you had ties with Brian and those sort of things. Did you have multiple offers? Were you thinking of going overseas? How did that all sort of unfold?
I think in my mind, I wanted to go overseas. I'd enjoyed my time in America. And I was like, okay, Europe is kind of the next stop on my journey. And I think my mum and grandfather have European citizenship. I was like, okay, I've got to get this Belgian citizenship. And for whatever dumb reason, I just never went down the path of getting it. I think I kind of aged out a couple of years into my time in Wollongong, so I couldn't play as a local over in Europe. But I had an agent who was the co-agent for Matt Garrison, who was an import. Not a lot of people know Matt Garrison. Personality as big as Texas, but he is one of the best teammates I've ever had. So he was an import for the Hawks before I got there, and then they brought him back. And I think I moved down to LA. I was living with my brand new agent, and he took me along to this training, and in walks Matt Garrison, larger than life. And he's just like, man, you got to come to Wollongong. You come to Wollongong, we're winning the championship. I guarantee you. No, I'd never met him. He'd probably maybe seen a game of mine on TV, but he was just so confident. And when it came to kind of talking about options and countries to go play in, I was just like, well, if I can get this much for a contract that kind of matches the European offers, I get to come home. I get to, if we play over summer, it's a beachside town. I'm going to be a starter. This could actually be a really, really good option. Europe theoretically will always be there, but this could actually work out really, really nicely. And it obviously did, and everything kind of fell into place that first year. Rookie, as you say, Rookie of the Year, won the championship, kind of made the national team for the blink of an eye at the end of that first season. It worked out perfectly. Yeah,
fantastic. And obviously, I'm assuming your family probably hadn't seen you play live for a number of years, and they were able to actually see you play.
Yeah. And mum and dad are in Melbourne, and so they'd come up to Wollongong, and Wollongong's this beautiful beach town. Yes, it's got the steelworks, but this is beach town. And they're like, you live in a holiday resort. My first apartment, and I'd never had my own apartment in college. My first apartment, paint peeling off the roof, 1.5 bedrooms, a bed that shouldn't have been legal in terms of quality, but I was just like, this is fantastic. I'm a block and a half from the beach. I go down there every day, swim after training, etc. This was the life. So I fell in love with the place, and my wife's from there, and yeah, it was absolutely perfect.
Yeah, it's amazing how many players that we've talked to that actually stay on there and live there after their careers. Lucas Walker, Cortez Groves, Oscar Foreman, and a whole bunch of them. That obviously it's a nice place. I haven't been there myself, but seems good. We've got a lot of fans on here that's from that area and around that area. Now, when you came here, so it sounds like from what you're saying, it was your full-time job, because some say that they had enough, they earn enough to just do basketball. Others said they did some other work on the side, and then others said that they were sort of studying, I guess, for what was going to happen at the end of their career. Were you doing anything in between or at the time when you were playing in Wollongong, any of those years?
So my first 2 years, I did nothing. I was living the dream. And then halfway through my second season, I blew my shoulder out and had 2 reconstructions. And I watched the rest of that second season. In the off season, Glenn Saville's on the national team, Matt Campbell's on the national team. Everyone disappears, and I'm stuck in Wollongong. I think I broke up with my girlfriend at the time, and I'm just sitting there, arm in a sling, just going, this sucks. This is this, and there was no guarantee that my shoulder was going to bounce back and be usable again. And so I kind of looked into getting my MBA and did that through open learning, and kind of took, and I don't know if it's, I assume it's still the case, but every team had to have a $10,000 fund for players that wanted to go get an education or do a course or something, a TAFE, et cetera, et cetera. And not many players did. And I was like, well, if Wollongong's got the fund and my per unit cost is X thousands of dollars and they have to pay it on my behalf, I will quite happily load myself up and do as many units as I can all at the one time so that someone else is paying this bill. And so I think in those last 2 years at Wollongong, I think I got through 4 or 5 units of a 12-unit MBA. And so that was kind of my off-season job. I did one unit in season, then two units in the off-season, just to kind of crunch through as much study as I could get done.
Yeah, no, that's very clever, very wise, because if you've got that opportunity, you may as well use it. I mean, I'm 36 and I think I finished paying my HECS off like 3 years ago, you know what I mean? So I think maybe the players didn't quite know what they had there with that. Although, having said that, Waxy Lucas Walker said Jesse Wagstaff's done like 3 degrees and it's all been paid for by like the Players Association or the fund or whatever they've got. So
yeah,
makes sense to use that. Now I'll get to sort of the first impression you made on myself and many others in terms of, you know, watching on the TV. And it was when I said earlier, sort of ahead of your time, was obviously the 3-point shooting. Was very, very rare back in those days. Obviously, most centers were back to the basket players. Not to say that you didn't do your inside stuff, but when I read the statistics, it'll make sense for anyone that hasn't seen it. Your first 3 seasons, you went 46%, 50%, and then 43% from 3-point line. And when I say ahead of your time is, I actually had one fan message me on the Instagram when I said we're having you on, and he said, yeah, sometimes Big Axe was sort of on a can't win situation because we would take the threes when they were going well, but then if he missed a couple, it would be like, why are you shooting them? You're a 5, you're a big guy, and that sort of thing. Whereas nowadays, I mean, you see almost all of the elite centers, you know, needing to have that shot. You know, doesn't matter who they are. You know, they can stretch the defense out, make the 5-man actually have to play man-to-man defense, get him out of the key, all those sort of things. And you were just so automatic from the 3-point line, and I think that's what caught my eye. So I guess it begs the question: growing up, was that something that you always did? Did you just enjoy shooting threes? Was there a coach that said this could be valuable? Were the coaches actually the opposite and hated it? What was your take on that?
It's interesting because I think all through juniors and high school, if I go back to my high school, I played the point guard, which sounds ridiculous, but through the magic, there was a coach called Andre Erlip, who was an assistant coach. And I trained with him Monday, Tuesday, Thursday from 6:30 to 8 o'clock in the morning. And all we did was ball handling and defense. Clearly, the work that we did on defense didn't help me down the line. I'll put my hand up and admit that. But ball handling, for my high school team, I played the point guard. And ultimately, I played with a couple other big guys. And I would just either lob the ball down to them in the post. And if they kicked it out, I was like, well, this is where I am. I may as well just shoot it. I had a decent touch, but it wasn't until my second year of college. I think I'd gone back to Magic, and in the off season, I just was like, well, I'll play the opposition player, and instead of shooting a 15-foot shot, I'll just shoot a 3. And what's Gorgon going to get mad at if I take a 3? I'm role playing, and just let me do it. And I went back to college, and I think my first kind of inter-team scrimmage, I took 10 threes and made 8 of them. Just dumb luck, made 8 of them. And the coach at the time was like, well, that works out nicely.
Very nicely.
All of a sudden I was allowed to shoot threes come game time. And once again, as I said, I was a 4th, 5th option. But when you're open, because you've got better players and you kind of drag big guys away, if you'd hit 1 or 2 a game and you take 3, then all of a sudden you're shooting 50 or 60%. I think my senior year, I was 54% from three, fourth in the nation from three-point shooting. And it's just opportunistic. I think if all of a sudden I became a focus, then I probably wouldn't get as many open threes. So that's kind of a trade-off. But I kind of took that from college. In the last 3 years, shot it really well, and went to the Hawks. And I think I shot my very first training at the Hawks. I think I shot a three and made it. And I don't think any guys on the Hawks had kind of seen me from kind of under 20 nationals. And 4 years later, I come back and I'm shooting threes. I think some local guys like, I don't know what you're doing, thinking you're doing that. And I've almost said, clearly you haven't paid attention to the kind of what I've done in the last few years. But I kind of kept shooting. And I think for the Hawks, we had Melvin Thomas. I don't know if you know Melvin. One of the best post scorers of the late 90s, early 2000s. And it worked beautifully the way the team was structured, because we had point guards that were kind of really efficient, and Matt Campbell and Glenn Saville that kind of played their roles. But if you dump the ball into Mel one-on-one, Mel's automatic from there. If my man comes to help, Mel was a great kick out and I was open for the three. I think what those players or what those people talked about in terms of I was kind of an enemy to myself, I became that three-point shooter. And you kind of talked about that 46% my first year. I think my field goal percentage that first year was 44%. So I shot better from three than inside the key. So I was just like, I'm a three-point shooter. This is going to be my bread and butter, which it was, but it was kind of my detriment. So once Melvin Thomas left, and I was like, oh, Axel, go in. And I think I watched a game tape of me from my Hawks days, and I was like, I was wide open, and the point guard didn't give it to me. And then I saw how inefficient I was from inside, and I was like, I would not have given me the ball either. I was terrible. So yeah, I was a really good spot up three-point shooter. And yeah, it helped my career. I think it certainly got me over to Europe when I probably shouldn't have any other time.
Yeah, no, very interesting, especially considering, when we had Matt Shanahan on, he was talking about, obviously him and Brendan had their differences, and he would say how it was basically shoot. If the ball goes in, you stay on. If you miss, you come off. So you obviously would have had to have shot the ball at a high clip, because there wouldn't have been much leeway if you didn't. Is that sort of your experience with Brendan?
I think I was very fortunate my first year that all planets aligned, where I think we had 5 or 6 new players, Matt Shanahan being one of them, Damon Lowry, Grant Kruger, me. And we were all relatively young. I think 8 out of the team were single, 24, 25 years old. And we were just dumb kids, just going out and rolling the dice. And I think we played with somewhat of a reckless abandon that I, at least as a start, I was just like, well, if I miss some shots, I'm not getting yanked because I know my role. So I didn't probably play with the same fear that Matt Shanahan did. Matt was in a really tough situation in terms of, as you say, Matt, you've got to be a microwave. You've got to hit this first one. If you miss that second one, well, we rolled the dice, because Brendan might have thought he had X, Y, and Z deficiencies, which didn't necessarily exist. But if you're known as a shooter and you don't hit the shots, then those other attributes that you theoretically don't bring, they kind of count against you. So I didn't have the shorter leash that Matt did, but I think towards the end of my 4 years in Wollongong, my leash was very, very short. So yeah. I mean, everyone has their Brendan stories, and I still count him as one of the best X's and O coaches I've ever had. So I'll put my hand up and admit that. But just the way sometimes the team was managed, it rubbed people the wrong way at times.
Yeah, well, he certainly had faith in you. I mean, if we go into specifics, I might be testing your memory here, but that 3-game championship win in 2001, with all due respect, your first 2 games of that series didn't light the world on fire individually. Yeah, played 20 minutes in the first game, 24 in the second. As he said, garbage, not so great. But this just goes to show how much faith, even after those 2, all of a sudden elevated 40 minutes in game 3.
Really?
And played completely different. So it's one of those things. By the way, for those listening, these were 48-minute games back then. So if anyone's wondering about that, what's your thoughts on that, by the way? Did you play any seasons with the 40 minutes instead of the 48?
I think...
or you might have played with McKinnon anyway in the 40s.
Yeah, definitely. McKinnon were 40-minute games. I think they may have still been 48. I played 40-minute games over in Europe and then came back to 48. I finished in 2008, 2009, so I probably would have been close to the end of that 48-minute era. In terms of, I think it's quality-wise, you get probably a better product in terms of 40 minutes. I think what the tough thing is, players are so good now that you got guys who back in the day, we maybe played 7, maximum 8 deep, and the rest were garbage players. Now you got teams who can legit run 9 and 10 deep, and maybe those 11th, 12th players would struggle to get some garbage time. So I think minutes-wise, those 8 through 10 guys that probably should be getting more time, they maybe get 8 to 10 minutes instead of the 15 to 20 minutes they might get in a 48-minute game, for argument's sake.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think, I guess there's a little bit of chatter going around about going back to the 48 minutes, but the way the NBL's going, I don't see any reason why you would mess with the way it's currently played out. I think all the games are exciting. You've got games that are never over till they're over. This season, we've seen multiple. The Jack Jumpers are a classic example. Come back from 15 points down with only 4 or 5 minutes to go. You know, you have that way. Whereas obviously 48-minute games can be a little bit of a blowout. In terms of NBA, was that ever on the radar? Summer leagues, anything like that for you?
Yeah, so out of Gonzaga, I went down to LA where my agent was based. And I had tryouts with Lakers, Sacramento, Houston, and Golden State, I think, that first year. Played LA and Salt Lake City summer leagues with Houston. Second year, went back into camp with Golden State, got cut after 3 days, and then 2 days later met them when I kind of hooked up with Houston again. I don't know how, but I had an absolute blinder against Golden State. I think Troy Murphy was like for like, and somehow I had 15 points, 5 points, and 5 blocks. Like, I was not a shot blocker and somehow had 5 blocks against this team. And I think I kind of ran past the Golden State assistant at the time who'd cut me 2 days before and kind of gave him a little nod as in, well, you did what you had to do. But yeah, so I had some good tryouts. I think it's a numbers game. I think you play on a summer league team and you're one of 17 people, and you might play in two out of 7 games, or you might play 4 out of 7. You just got to kind of have a crack and give it a go. And I did the best I could. And I think I was potentially invited back into vet camp with Seattle, which I didn't even know about. My agent said no on my behalf without my knowledge. I think he said something about Axel will only go into vet camp if he has a guaranteed contract. And I think I was at the Goodwill games, and I sat down, and teammates on the Goodwill games kind of put this newspaper article in front of me, and I read it, and I was like, what? I never said that. They were all looking at me like,
that's all good.
Crick, what on earth do you think you're good enough to get a guarantee? I'd never even heard of it. But that obviously never happened. So I think halfway through the next season, I did my shoulder, and I never got a call back. But it was interesting. I mean, NBA Summer League, it's another world altogether, let alone making the big show. So it was those 2 summers I had an absolute ball. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes 2 of you now. You and Simon Dwight, the first 2 to knock back the NBA.
Yeah, I think Simon's a more realistic option to have actually knocked back and consciously made that choice, as opposed to me and my dumbass agent speaking on my behalf.
Yeah. Now, I guess obviously as fans, we see the Summer League, especially now on ESPN and things like that, and see the Summer League games. Now, when you say you're invited for workouts, what happens behind the scenes? Does that mean a assistant coach or something puts you through an individual workout, or are you straight into team workouts, or a bit of both? What happens when you initially rock up to I guess an invitation to a camp? Yeah,
so there can be kind of 2 different types. The first time I went into camp with Houston, I think it was me and 2 other guys, and they flew us in, and we kind of did some individual drills and agility drills and shooting drills. And then they sat you down in a room with all the coaches. So I got Rudy Tomjanovich sitting right across from me and 12 to 15 assistants, and they were just kind of throwing questions at you. I remember that Houston one because I remember sitting down, I think whoever was in the trade on the same day, they were legit college superstars. I had no business being anywhere near them in terms of talent, and I was just like, how can I differentiate myself from these guys who can jump out of the gym and do everything? And they said, "What if we drafted you? What do you think you'd bring to the team?" And I was just like, "Well, it's not going to be scoring. It's not going to be rebounding. It's going to be help defense, spot up shooting at the end of a quarter, good passing, and great teammate." I was like, because I'm not your superstar. I don't expect to be a superstar, and I will be the guy that's on a league minimum. And you could hear a pin drop because I don't think anyone had ever gone, "I'm not the guy." You don't sell yourself by saying you're not the guy, but that actually worked because they're like, this guy, I know exactly what my strengths are. I'm an outside three-point shooter. You've got Hakeem Olajuwon and you got Steve Francis on that team at the time. I'm not coming in going, "Steve, fuck, give me the ball, man." I'm not that guy, but I can be that diversion and set a hard screen and blow 6 fouls and be really good kind of offensive facilitator. And if I get a shot, great, because I can shoot it. But otherwise, I know my role. And stunningly enough, that actually worked. And they said, "All right, we're bringing you into summer league. We'll see you in a month's time when we kind of come in for a week's camp, and you'll be with us the rest of the summer." So
that was purely off an interview.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did okay in the tryout. They're like, "Dunk the ball 18 times in a row," and I was like, "No, I don't know how. I can't do that. I'm gonna be hands on knees, exhausted after 10. I'm not that guy." But I think they just knew that, okay, this guy knows how to run offense. He's played for Gonzaga. They run kind of a really high level, smart system. We can use this guy. And I had a really good summer league, enough that I was borderline getting invited back into vet camp. That obviously didn't work, and so I went to the Hawks. But yeah, or you just get, I think Golden State, I was brought in, I was one of 20 guys, and it's just drills and drills and drills. I think Jason Richardson, who I didn't know from Bar of Soap, I tried to take a charge on him. And I think about halfway through the charge, one of my teammates like, "What are you doing?" And I've got his nuts in my face, and he's just posterized me, and I'm on the ground. And I think I got cut maybe that afternoon. I was just like, well, that's just, well, at least it was memorable for somewhere along the line.
Yeah, funny story to tell at least.
Yeah,
that's interesting. But it is great self-awareness. I mean, I think there's a bit of a key theme with a lot of the players that have been successful in teams without having to be stars, is they were very self-aware about their role. And once they were aware of that, it was, like Stephen Hall said last week, how do I become, the best at that role? And same with Mick Hill. He said the same thing. How did I had to become the best at what I was going to do, because it wasn't going to be put up 20 points a game because that was CJ's job, or that was, someone else's job, And I think that's a good lesson for everyone in terms of that. We'll sort of fast forwards now towards the end of your career. How did it end? Was it your choice? Was it a tap on the shoulder? And how did you feel about it at the time?
It's interesting. So I signed a 3-year deal at the Melbourne Tigers and was let go after 1 year. And I wasn't exactly shattered to have left that. I don't think I fit Al Westover's system, and I was playing behind Chris Anstey, who way better than me. But I think I'd come back from Europe where I'd played 30, however many minutes a game. I was like, oh, well, my skills will get recognized and I'll kind of be used for what I can bring to the table. But ultimately, my role was to give Chris a break, because Chris, as the reigning MVP, should automatically get way more time than Axel Dench. And I don't think I got that, and I don't think I dealt with it that well at the time. And I got frustrated, and I'd be sitting on the bench, and you go through the trainings, and then you play 8 minutes a game, and you're just like, oh, I know I can help, but that wasn't my role on the team. So I was parted ways and I went to Adelaide. And I think it was either a 2-year deal in Townsville, and I would have been behind Ben Pepper up in Townsville, or a 1-year deal in Adelaide with an team option for the second year. And I was like, okay, theoretically, there's me, there's David Cooper. And I think halfway through the preseason, they signed Neil Mottram. And I was like, okay, I think I can still keep my starting spot. And I think I kept it for the first 2 games. And then I lost it. And by the end of the season, I was down to, I think my shortest game time was 63 seconds in a game that season. And I was near on finishing my MBA. I had a son, and I just, oddly enough, I disliked the game of basketball because I was just like, I'm putting all this work in and there's no reward. And I was probably an enemy to myself, and it was one of those self-fulfilling prophecies. Interesting that I think I was playing a game towards the end of the season, and a referee was like, Axel, what's going on with you? Why are you not playing? What's going on? And I think it was one of those honest moments where you say, I can't even remember the referee. It's just like, I just hate the game. I hate what it's doing to me in terms of I get home and I get joy out of my son and my wife and this young growing family, but my day-to-day, my job has actually become a job. It's not a passion project anymore. And I think to keep playing, I had a 3rd-year deal with the Tigers that didn't work out. And to keep playing, I would have had to go back to Romania or a country that I can't even remember, and it would have been a crappy league for crappy pay and a crappy scenario. And I was just like, that's it. It's time to hang up. I've got my 2 degrees. I've milked as much as I could out of my lack of athletic ability. It's time to get one of those jobs, things I've heard so much about, and let's see what the real world has to offer. So it was an interesting time to kind of move back and kind of start at the absolute bottom. And just, I think in 3 months, I had 96 coffees or hot chocolates on my side of things, and just meeting and greeting as many people as I could until I got a job. And that's even with 2 degrees, you just got to do the hard yards.
Yeah, no, that's good wisdom on you, and you obviously had a good upbringing. So you obviously, the whole way through, you've talked through your career, you've been quite, as I said before, self-aware, but also analytical, and then what you just mentioned was, being honest and vulnerable about your situation, and then you can actually do something about it, which is obviously what you did. But we mentioned a club before, McKinnon, and I'm not sure, you probably played for a bunch of other clubs down here in Melbourne, but you said you lost your passion for the game. You went back and played a bit more. Did that come back, or was it just you want to play with friends? What was the situation there?
No, so when I finished Adelaide, we moved back, and I said to my wife, babe, I'm taking a year off. If I turn into a whale in that year, I'm just taking a year off so my body can heal. I mean, all ex-players will talk about their knees and joints, and I just need to take a year off. And that 1 year, after 1 year, I think I hadn't put on any weight. And after, I was like, well, let's extend this 1 year into 3 years. And I think I was, funnily enough, playing with Matt Shanahan at MSAC on a Monday night. And Marcus Timmins saw me playing and got in contact and said, I am the player coach at McKinnon. We're Division 2 Big V. Come down, meet the guys. If you want to have a run around, that'd be great. We'd love to have you. So I went down. I think they had a club barbecue. So I met the young guys, and they were all 19, 20 and just enthusiastic. And I was like, wait on. So it's Marcus Timmins. It's going to be a green light. I train 2 times a week. I don't really have to play defense. I can shoot as many times as I want. There's not really a downside to this scenario. It's just going to be fun and kind of get those competitive juices flowing again. And so I ended up playing there for 2 years, blew my ankle out and had a reco. So took a couple of years off, became president for a couple of years on the board. And then I was like, well, I can't negotiate my own contract, so I'll step down from being president, come back and play. And I played there for another 3 years. And it was kind of a nice ending. If you don't finish a professional kind of career on your own terms, play a bit of semi-professional, get a bit of kind of pocket money. It's still a competitive league. Guys play hard for the right reasons. And I had an absolute ball.
Yeah. No, well, that's good to hear, because the last thing we want to, I guess, anyone in the basketball community wants to hear is that, someone who did so much for basketball ends up resenting it, and leaves it bitter. And Steve Carfino was on here and talked about, Michael Jordan, even the greatest. He goes, you watch that documentary series, and for all the money he's got, for all the success he's had, he comes across as a bitter old man, who's never, not happy in life. So that's great that you had it, and great that you became president. I didn't know that, because I guess, well, for those that aren't from Melbourne here, McKinnon had a guy running it in the early days. It was a bit of a nutter, and
yeah. So I think I came in 2 or 3 presidents after him.
Right.
one guy stood down. God, he's the trainer for Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, Eric.
Oh, Hollingsworth.
Eric Hollingsworth.
Yeah.
So he was the president, and he stepped down. So I nominated myself, thinking I might be one of 5 people, and I was the only one that nominated. So I was kind of a walk-up start. But it was interesting. I was telling a story the other day. My last season at McKinnon, I think I was playing, and my wife did the dutiful thing and clapped in the crowd, and she was sitting next to someone who didn't know, and she said, "Oh, which one's your son?" And she said, "Oh, see that bald guy about 15 meters behind everyone else? That's my husband." And she kind of told me that story, and I was just like, it could be time to hand the reins over to someone else, because it was fun, but I was probably holding somebody back from getting an opportunity, so it was time to hang them up.
Yeah, no, fair enough. No, but that's a great story. You got good memories there. I'm sure the young kids would have been excited just to play with someone of your caliber, and give the poor blokes on Monday night at MSAC a break from having Matt Shanahan and Axel Dench rock up. That's a bit harsh.
Well,
I was going to ask as well, because we've got some coaches on here.
You're frozen.
Oh, have you got me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Excellent. We've got quite a lot of coaches on here, and I guess a great opportunity to ask someone who was the biggest guy, essentially, always in the team. Any advice on what they can give big guys, whether it's offensively or defensively? Because you do see, whether it's bigs, almost getting accidental fouls just because they get in the way, and those sort of things. Do you have anything that you could give them advice on if they've got a really big guy coaching them?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the young big guys who haven't grown into their body, haven't grown into their coordination,
exactly, yeah.
And they're just behind the 8 ball, and they probably play with point guards, and I experienced it myself, and you see it even now, point guards who have developed at 12, 13, and they're playing with a 13-year-old Gumby who he's got 2 left feet, and they get frustrated, and then the big guy thinks it's their fault, and the coach is like, well, I need to have the team functioning well. This guy will eventually be good, but right now he's just terrible. But we've just got to do the hard yards. I think it's, for coaches, it's just be patient, positive reinforcement. For the young big guys, it's going, okay, you can't be everything all at once. You've got to work out, okay, what's going to be my thing on defense? If I'm a good help defender, that means I'm talking really loudly and I'm just yelling. If you look at Larry Davidson up in Wollongong, he had a 3-point shot, and the greatest help defender in probably Wollongong Hawks history, because he just talked the whole time. I don't know if he was a great defender, but everyone knew that he was just guiding them and this kind of floor general in the middle of the key. So what's your thing going to be as a big guy? Offensively, have that go-to move that has a counter, whether it's a shuffle over your left shoulder, and the counter is a spin back to finish with your left hand. Have something that whatever you do, you've got a counter to, and no one can stop you. If you do those one things, your teammates will all of a sudden have more confidence in you, because you've kind of shown them that they can trust you with the ball. And then defensively, as long as you can hide your liabilities, which I'll put my hand up, I was the worst. I was the worst defender one-on-one in the history of the game, but my teammates knew that they needed help me, and I tried to help out as much as I could when they were in need. And if you can do those things, become indispensable in at least one thing at either end of the floor, then all of a sudden you have a solidified role that the coach trusts you in and your teammates trust you in. And if you can do that, and then just slowly but surely just build on these things 1%, 1%, going to be 12, 13-year-old, by the time you're 16, 17, you're way more polished, you're way more coordinated, and you have a game that people can build a platform from.
That's fantastic. And the way you put it with the examples and that is awesome. You're probably going to have coaching directors now contacting you, wanting you to do coaching clinics. But no, it makes sense. Like, simplify the offense. I think we see it sort of in individual trainings as well. You give them, 8, 9, 10 different post moves, but that's not really going to translate into a game. It's just all too much. Yeah. So no, that makes sense. Yeah.
I took, and I've got to go in 5 minutes because I've got
no worries, mate.
a work project. But you look at brands, and I go in and I research brands, and you go, you could make these 15 to 20 shifts from and to something. You could try and do them all, and you're going to do them all badly. But if you just focus on these three things, these three key things for your brand or your product or what you want to be, then that's what you can do. And a young developing big guy, or even a point guard who's just like, well, I'm third string rotation, just be known for one really, really good thing that no one else can do. And all of a sudden you change the way people perceive you and your position in the team. And they're just really small things, but those small things make a difference if you just kind of solidify them and reinforce them over and over and over again.
Yeah, no, 100%. It makes sense. And I know we've got to let you go in a minute, so I will just ask to wrap it up. Do you still watch the NBL? And if you do, what sort of teams do you like at the moment?
I watch the NBL. I've got it kind of taped on my kind of fetch box. I give it a quarter. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I gave it a quarter. And if it was a garbage game, then I wouldn't watch the rest. But now, because the league has just gotten so strong and so equal across the board, there's no kind of struggling teams. Hawks may be struggling at the moment. Brisbane may be struggling at the moment because I think there's probably some flow and maybe chemistry and role deficiencies here and there. But the other 8 or so teams, anyone can beat anyone on any night. And if I look at a team that I really enjoy watching, it's New Zealand Breakers or Jack Jumpers. I think Jack Jumpers in particular, I think kind of going back to it, all of their players know their role. No one's coming out with my mentality going, if I get 2 extra points in this quarter, I'll have 12 by the end of the game. No. You've got guys who like, if I'm absolutely the only one open, I'll shoot. Otherwise, my job is to distribute. My job is to rebound. My job is to block shots and push the ball up, et cetera, et cetera. They are as polished as you can get. For a club that's only 3 seasons old, they're as polished as you can get. I think what they've done is phenomenal, not only for Tasmania, but for the game of basketball in the NBL. They've done a great job.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, Scott Roth will have a very big contract when he comes up for renewal. But look, thanks a lot, mate. I know you've got to go. Thanks for being so generous with your time and going so in depth and in detail with everything. It's the best way for people to learn. I think that's the whole point of the podcast, is sharing experiences so that we can learn from more people. Same as when you said you had your 96 coffees, trying to network with people. The more you get around, the more you learn, the better everyone is. So thanks again, mate. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll get this episode up for everyone to have a listen to. But enjoy your meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
No, thanks for having me. Cheers.
No worries, mate.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast and any of our other episodes, make sure to like and subscribe to our channels and leave us a review. We will catch you in the next episode.